Warning: this podcast may contain graphic and triggering content. Please listen at your own risk. Each individual struggle is different, and everyone's recovery and healing journey is different. Please reach out to a certified medical professional if you need help. Welcome to episode 17 of Stomp the Stigma, the podcast aimed to fight the stigma surrounding mental health through education, awareness, experiences, resources, and the vulnerable truth. Joining me to stomp the stigma today is local radio personality Josie Balka. She's here to talk about her incredible weight loss transformation, as well as her healing journey with anxiety and how that has affected her life so far. Thank you for coming on the podcast with me. I'm super excited to talk to you. I'm a big fan of yours. It's so weird. I was listening to you on the radio today, and now I'm like talking to you. So this is kind of crazy.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really sweet of you. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I've done just like one or two podcasts with other people, but I haven't done many. So it's always fun to kind of see how it works and stuff.
Yeah, first I just wanted to say, you have such a large platform and I guess more of an influence on more people than the average person does. So I just wanted to thank you for being so honest and vulnerable and open about your struggles in your life on the radio when you have so many people listening to you and being influenced by what you're saying.
I think it's just I'm always looking for ways to connect to other people and be like, hey, this is happening to me. Has this happened to you?
Yeah.
And it's just it's even just when you're Googling symptoms and you're like, what's this? And then you'll go on forums and look at pictures and see what other people have been through, and you can compare notes and stuff. And I feel like sometimes it's just easier for people who are also struggling, instead of going on Google and being like, am I normal? Just hearing somebody else who's like, yeah, I'm actually freaking out all the time too. So maybe, and then it also selfishly on my end helps me, because if I post something transparent about being really anxious on one particular week, it's helpful when people reach out and they're like, me too. And I'm like, oh, thank God. I thought that I was dying, but I'm glad that everybody's feeling some type of way this week, so that you I don't know, it's easier to feel like you're not alone in it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the second that one person starts talking about something, everybody else feels like it's kind of easier to jump into it. So,
well, yeah, that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast in the first place, is just growing up with my own mental health issues. There was not many people that would actually talk about it, and I was like, I'm so alone. Am I the only one that's going through this? And I think talking about it and just hearing other people's experiences makes it so much easier to talk about your own, and it helps relate to other people as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that there's this, it's weird because when I was younger, and I don't know, are we around the same age? How old are you?
Yeah, I'm 28.
Yeah, I'm 27. So I'm almost 28. So it's just when I was in elementary school and high school and stuff, I was always anxious. I was always nervous. I always felt this way. Yeah. But I never thought I have anxiety. I was I'm just nervous right now, And it took finally sitting down with a therapist and being these are all the things that I feel, and then being well, you have anxiety. And me being oh, there's a name for it. I thought everybody just felt this way all the time, But it's nice to kind of the fact that every day it feels like it gets a little more normalized.
Yeah, I agree. I was the same way in elementary school when I first started experiencing depression, and I didn't I had no idea what it was at the time, and I kind of wish that I had somebody to tell me that it wasn't normal and that I was different from everyone else, but also that I wasn't the only one going through it, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So do you struggle with, is it just anxiety or is it anything else?
I don't really know exactly. I think it's mostly just anxiety. I would say that I go through phases where I feel sad, but I don't think that I go through phases where I have had severe crippling depression or anything. I think anxiety is the main one. I panic a lot, and I not panic attacks, but just in my head, and it's very hard for me to dial it back without the reassurance of another person being like, it's fine, like, you're gonna be fine, like you're not gonna die. And like it's kind of gotten to a point where like I'll talk to my therapist about it, or I've had like really bad moments where like doctors and stuff have been like, maybe medication wouldn't be the worst thing. Like when I was like in the hospital for a little bit a couple years ago with an infection, I was freaking out so hard, and like they sent in a social worker, and she was like, you know what, like this level of panic isn't necessarily like the average way to react to something like this. Right. So maybe once this is all over, you could consider like taking some kind of medication to calm you down on a regular basis, because it could like really change your life. And so I think it just all kind of like stemmed from anxiety. And even recently with my therapist, I was like, what about meds? And she was like, you know what, like it might not be the worst idea, you know? But it's always been like circled around anxiety and not so much anything else.
Right.
But yeah.
What is your opinion on medication?
I think I have a lot of friends who use it and swear by it, and like sometimes when you have like a chemical imbalance, you need help to fix it, and that then there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people will say that they don't want to rely on medication, and I think that if you have the option to say that, you're lucky. Like I feel lucky that I feel overwhelmed by it some days, but on more days I'm like, I can handle this. Because I think that a lot of people can't
I agree.
physically do it because it's really all is it's sometimes it's just chemical imbalance, and you need medication just kind of the same way that you do when you have a cold, or when you have a flu, or when you have like diabetes or something. Like you need something to balance you out. And I think I'm not against it. I would rather not if I can help it. But if it comes to a point where I ever need it, I wouldn't be like, no. I would be like, okay, let's give it a shot and see if it helps.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So do you remember kind of the very beginning when you first realized that you were struggling with anxiety?
The more that I like dive into it, the more I realize it's been always. Yeah. Like I've always been really anxious and worried that I'm like dying, or like that the worst is going to happen, and making up a story and convincing myself it's true. And I've been doing that since I was like a little kid. So like, but I never really realized that it was like a problem until I'd say like 2017. I went through something with someone, and I was just like totally taken out by it. Like it was just like a shitty, sorry for swearing, like a crappy not relationship, but just something that like was like a little bit traumatic. And I remember that situation making me so anxious that like I couldn't sleep, and I was so stressed that I would get like strep throat once a month, and I was in the morning unsure like if I could even get out of bed because I was so anxious. And since then, it's actually never been as bad as it was when that happened. But I did go to my doctor at that point and was like, I need something to help me. And he like prescribed me Ativan and was like, just put this on a magnet on your fridge and know that you can go pick up this prescription, but if you don't need to, don't fill it. And I was like, okay. And I never did. I never ended up like using it. But I remember just having it helped me to know like if I ever go through anything like this again, I can go to the pharmacy and have something that would calm me down. And like it was around that time that I had a panic attack for the first time ever while I was driving on a Crowchild, and I like called an ambulance. I thought I was having a stroke. I thought I was gonna die, and then they came and they were like, "No, you're fine." And like it was just like a little period of time where I was like, "Oh my god, like this has to have a name. Like this has to be something more than just nerves." And over the years of like talking to new therapists and figuring it out, it's like come to light that it's just generalized anxiety, and a lot of people deal with it. It's definitely like a weird thing to deal with. Like now that I'm like kind of tracing back to like that time, I remember like going to one therapist and talking to her and being like, I don't like you. And like I'd go to the next one and talk to them and be like, I don't like you. And it was always like, I remember the moment when I would always decide that I didn't want to keep seeing a particular therapist for anxiety was always when they would say, it would always be like, so where are you from? Like, what do you do? And I'd be like, I'm from Toronto. I moved to Calgary. And they would always go, that must have been hard for you. And I'd always go, yeah. But that's not where any of this stemmed from. I'm pretty good at making new friends and like starting over and stuff. So it was never that. And it was always like they'd cling to that.
Yeah.
And it's definitely deeper than this. And I finally found like a psychologist in the midst of all of it that like kind of concentrated on like healing from within, which is usually some kind of spiritual BS that I would laugh at. And I was like, I'll just give it a chance. Yeah. And there were certain things that were too much for me that I was like, this isn't going to work for me. I don't believe this. Like hypnotizing and stuff like that. I couldn't fall into it because I just couldn't believe it. But like, I feel like once I found my therapist or my psychologist rather that like worked for me, it really made everything get better a lot faster. And now I've been seeing the same one for like almost 3 years. And it's like that kind of regular help from the same person can be a huge aid in kind of making you feel a little bit more calm, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now that you're kind of realizing what you're struggling with and what is going on, looking back over your life and like when you were younger, do you kind of see moments and you're like, oh, that probably happened because I had anxiety or anything like that?
I think more so than that, I look back at things and go, I probably have anxiety because of that.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like, just kind of things that you realize like that maybe like happened when you were a kid, or like things that happened when you were in school, or like the way that things were handled, or like whether your parents were together or not, and like if you like got like the love from your dad that you need and things like that that your therapist kind of brings up to you, and like it's I have two amazing parents and I love them both very much, and like I would never look back at anything they did and be like, no, like I think that like the way that I was raised was wonderful, and I think there's certain things that just can't be helped. I think I'm just an anxious person. But there's definitely things that you look back at and go, oh, you know what? Like maybe I deal with these kinds of problems and this kind of worry and this kind of anxiety in this way because of this. Yeah. You know? And it's just kind of helpful. I don't know about you, but when I'm going to solve a problem, I need all of the pieces. Like, I can't wrap my head around something unless I understand every single part of it, which is why I'm bad at math, because it was always kind of like, that's just how math works. And I'd be like, but why? Like, why? I don't understand. And, like, it's, like, been so helpful in therapy looking back at things, like, from when I was a kid and, like, things in school and things in high school and stuff, that I'm like, oh, I deal with this stuff this way now because of that. So if I can mend that in my head, moving forward, I'll kind of deal with these things a little bit better, you know?
So I know there's a big debate on whether mental health issues stem from just a chemical imbalance or whether they're kind of triggered or brought on by like environmental traumas and stuff. So would you say that it's kind of a combination for you?
Yeah, I think that, I think it's actually probably, in my personal opinion, I am not a doctor, obviously. I think it has a lot to do with your environment, and the way that you were taught to deal.
Yeah, I do too.
So, like, if you were taught when something bad happens, you worry, and you always prepare for the worst. And if you were taught, like, that, like, maybe somebody who's, like, supposed to be really secure in your life is going to leave, or, like, maybe that, like, love doesn't always work out, you know, like things like that. If you watch those things happen, you become a product of your environment and you believe that that's the only way, right? And like, so you start to like live by those things. And it's funny when I like talk with my therapist about like relationships and like the way that I react to things in relationships and the way that I react to like traumatic moments and like fear and health, anxiety and stuff. It always stems back to the way that those things were dealt with around you, right? And like, and sometimes you take things too literally. Like, my mom worked really hard to keep me safe. I'm her only child. It was just the two of us, and like with that, comes me being worried forever about every little thing going wrong all the time, because everything needs to be safe. And if it's not safe, then don't do it, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, and I think that anxiety comes from that, because you're, like, stressed in situations where you're like, is this safe? And if it's not, and like, that mindset is helpful. I'm sure it's saved me many times, because I've overthought things before I do them, and sometimes it'll save me from getting hurt or, like, physically, emotionally, whatever. Sometimes it's just like, Jesus, I wish I could just dive into something for once, you know? So I guess, like, that's, like, a long way of saying I definitely think that you're a product of your environment, and if you are raised by an incredibly calm parent, like, it could also affect you negatively in a way that you don't care enough about things, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like the way that you're taught, usually we're taught one way. And when you grow up, that is more often than not going to be a problem. And you're going to have to, like, seek help in how you deal with things emotionally, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely, if not always, at least partially attributed to your environment.
Yeah, I agree completely. A lot of people, when it comes to relationships, they're like, they don't want to know anything about your past. Like, your past is behind you. They have no interest. But at the same time, for people like us that have been shaped by our past, and say we react to certain situations in a particular way because of our past, I think it's so important to share in relationships kind of what you've been through and how that has affected your reactions. Because I feel like that's such a huge part of our lives.
Definitely. I think that I always find it funny when I hear about, like, friends and stuff who, like, they'll date somebody new, and then this person, like, doesn't want to know anything about the past, doesn't want to know about your last boyfriend, doesn't want to know about, like, just, you kind of, like, start from where you meet.
Yeah.
But, like, as a person, you're a product of everything that's happened to you, and every person that has, like, contributed to you. And, like, don't you want to know about, like, somebody who treated you negatively, and that's why maybe you are scared a little bit, or, like, why, like, if somebody has like, abused you, why you would be a little bit standoffish and stuff like that. And I can never understand when people don't want to hear the stories, and when people don't want to tell the stories. And I find that, like, even I'll be on dates, and sometimes, like, somebody will accidentally bring up an ex, and they'll be like, oh, I shouldn't talk about this. And I'm like, why? Because if your ex is a part of the reason that you are who you are now, and I might fall in love with this person, that person has a part in that. So why would you not want to hear that story? And I think that, like, everybody is, and I heard one of my coworkers, her name's Joelle, say this once, that everybody is just a product of all of their stories. And when you meet somebody, you know them in that moment, and the only other way to get to know them is from stories that they'll tell you, that other people will tell you, and that you will have moving forward to tell other people. So, like, the fact that anybody ever tries to, like, be like, I don't want to talk about that relationship, it's like, well, why not? Because if it was good, we can learn from it, and if it was bad, we can learn from it. And, like, it's especially when you have a past, if you are anxious, or you have depression, or you have PTSD, or you have just kind of something going on in your head that, like, makes you navigate things a little bit differently than somebody who doesn't have any trauma. Like, I personally would want to know that about someone, so that in your friendship or your relationship with them, you can navigate it in the right way, and, like, be sensitive to that, because everybody has their share, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I definitely, like, it's something that I'm very, probably almost to a fault, open about. Just I'm anxious. If I had a bad day, I'll tell you. If you ask me how my day was and it wasn't good, I'll let you know. You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I think a lot of people are like, they'll take it as, like, a negative thing, or, like, a complaining thing, or, like, oh, this girl's a lot thing. And when you're like that and you have a lot to share, I think a lot of people quickly sometimes feel afraid of it. So it's definitely something that stands in the way. But it's, like, the right people understand. And I feel like also when you've been through a lot, your friendships are more meaningful, because the people that stick around are the people who listen to the stories, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, if somebody can't handle all of you, including that side of you, then they're not the person for you. So if they can't handle it from the beginning, then you might as well
100%.
find out early.
My therapist actually brought up something really interesting recently because I was really anxious about something, and she was like, "Why don't you just tell this person that this is how your mind works, and that you often panic about these things?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Why not?" And I was like, "Because he doesn't need to know that." She was like, "Because you're ashamed of it." And I was like, "No, because it's not his business." And she was like, "No, it's because you're ashamed. Because you would bring it up if you weren't ashamed." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess." And she was like, "Don't be ashamed of who you are. Tell him." And I was like, "No." But like, but like thinking about it, like I'm glad I didn't, just because it wasn't the right moment or the right thing to say. But like in the end of it, everything is just like attached to like shame and like the way that you feel about yourself, and like the things that you choose to hide are because you're like embarrassed, right? So like I don't know, when you find a person and you feel no shame and you can just tell them everything about you, that means that it's like I feel like that means that it's like a special, probably more lasting relationship.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So do you think that anxiety is something that you are going to live with for your entire life? Or is that something that you could overcome? I don't know if that's possible.
That's interesting. I was actually thinking about that the other day, and it sucks. Like I was wondering, I was like, do you think I'll always be worried about this?
Yeah.
Like when I have babies one day, am I gonna sleep? Like, am I gonna be able to know that like they're okay? Probably not. And like my mom, I remember her just worrying all the time when I was a kid, and I think that like I'll find coping mechanisms for my anxiety. But I don't think it'll ever go away unless I like take medication. And I think if I work really hard and like really figure out the roots of it and like continually put work in every day to like changing my mindset and like calming down, I think that there will be less bad days. But I think that every day, probably forever, I'll feel a little anxious about something, you know? It's crazy to think that there's people who don't.
I know. It's crazy to try and describe what you're going through to somebody that has no idea and can't understand. It's like
it's like hard. I have girlfriends who genuinely are like, I don't feel anxious or depressed.
Yeah.
Ever. And I'm like, what? How is that possible? Yeah. But they're genuine, and it's not like a pride thing. Like they're like, I wish I could understand what you're going through so I could help you. I have a girlfriend who's like that, and like her boyfriend struggles with it, but she doesn't. So when I talk about it with them, oh, my alarm's going off, sorry. When I talk about it with them, he's always like, yeah, and she's like, I don't know. But like like obviously support comes from all sides, even when people don't like fully understand it. But I like really do envy those people who just are like, I don't know what that's like, you know?
So for somebody that has no idea and has never been through, I guess, a panic attack or an anxiety episode or something like that, how do you even begin to describe that to somebody? Like, what does that feel like to you? Because I know it's different for everybody.
It depends on the type of anxiety. So like for me, let's say like that panic attack that I had, it was like, just like my mouth got really dry, my hands got really shaky. And I always have shaky hands because I have a tremor in my hands, like a really little one, but like they're always a little shaky, but I like really felt it. And my heart rate, I went through a phase where I was like obsessed with my pulse. So I like felt my heart rate like raising, and I like was feeling it, and it was like, and I was like, what the hell? And then I like started to get like sweaty, and I never sweat. So I was just driving, and I was like, I think I'm actually gonna have a stroke right now. Which now thinking about it, I'm like, obviously not. But I was also a smoker at the time too, so I was like, you never know. I was like 23, so unlikely, but still. And like, I just like pulled over, and I was like, holy shit, I'm gonna die. And I like put my hand out the window just to be like, I don't want to die by myself. So like, hopefully maybe somebody pulls over and like tells me that everything's okay while I just like wait. And somebody pulled over. It's actually a nurse. She talked me through it. We called 911. The ambulance came. They checked on my vitals, and they were like, we don't want you to drive for a little bit just because you're like so high panic mode, but like you're not having a stroke. You're healthy. You're gonna be fine. It's just like panic. So there was that, which I've always been, which is funny, I've always just been like scared to have another one.
Mm-hmm.
So I panic about having panic attacks, but I've never actually had another one that was like of that caliber, which is good. And I hope it never happens again. But I think also when I'm like on the verge of it, like sometimes I'll feel like it's hard to swallow, or I'm starting to panic. I'll just kind of like roll down all the windows and just be like, this is just all in your head. Like you're just making this up. And then you kind of like slowly come out of it and calm down. So that's that. Like that's what it feels like when I have a panic attack. But my anxiety episodes these days, many of them are like health related. So, let's say the other day I get dry eyes sometimes, and like it's like the kind of dry eye where it like actually feels like there's like raindrops on the windshield on my eyes for like a few days. And it's happened before. I've been to the ophthalmologist about it, but I start Googling dry eyes. And is it possible that dry eyes never go away? And can dry eyes lead to blindness?
No.
And I'll start taking pictures of my eyes, and then I'll like look and see that there's like so many veins. And like one time I literally messaged like 3 of my friends. I was like, send me a picture of your eyes, just to see like how many veins they had in their eyes, to see if it was normal. And like lately it's just like health panic after health panic after health panic, which probably has something to do with the fact that there's a pandemic and a lot of people have been dying.
Yeah.
And every day there's a new death count, and I'm so scared of dying. So there's like health anxiety where I will literally wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and Google symptoms for 3 hours and then get up and go to work. And I'm like just wiped from it.
Oh my God.
And then like another way that my anxiety shows is I'll make up a whole story. Like I'll be like, my work isn't happy with me and they're gonna change my shift forever. And I'll like go into a meeting with my boss expecting him to be like, you now work overnight. And I'll be like, that makes sense, because why would they not do that? Like, I had a really crappy week at work. I didn't do a good job. They're going to put somebody more fit to do my job in my spot, and they're going to put me on overnights again, which I did when I was first starting in this industry like 6 years ago. It would never actually happen. Mm-hmm. But I've like lost sleep over things like that. And then in my meeting, my boss will just be like, hey, just checking in, so you know you are. And that's the end of it. And I'm like, oh. You're going to put me on overnights. And I said that recently, and he was like, why would I do that? And I was like, I don't know. The stories in my head are so vivid and so real that I will believe them and panic over them. And they haven't even happened yet. And it happens when I'm like in a new relationship with somebody. Like if I don't hear back from them, I'm like, you hate me and you're dating 10 other girls. And like it'll just be like so believable in my head until it's like proven otherwise. So it's definitely tiring, and it shows up in phases. Like it'll be phases of stories and like phases of health anxiety and phases of panic and phases of like checking my pulse, and but it's definitely tiring.
Okay, that sounds exhausting. Like I can't imagine. So for me, I don't have anxiety to the same extent. And so that just sounds exhausting to me. And the fact that that is kind of like in the back of your mind all the time, it's so crazy to me. But I guess, that's the same for me trying to describe my experiences with depression to somebody that has no idea. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy.
It's bad sometimes because it does like take a toll on my relationships and friendships too, because I'm like pretty open to talking about it, and often I'll seek reassurance from my friends, and sometimes it can be too much, especially if you forget to be like, can you take this on today?
Right.
Because they have their own things. Like your life is your life, and then in their life you're just part, like you're not their whole life. And like one of my friends recently said to me, he was like, sometimes you just like have a whole day where everything is wrong. Like everything is bad. And I'm trying to have a good day, and then you're texting me about all this bad shit. And I'm like, chill, just be more positive. And like sometimes it's not just like that. It's not just that easy to be more positive. But sometimes it is definitely something that should be considered as like, it's nobody else's responsibility to deal with your anxiety with you, unless it's your like paid therapist. So it is exhausting, and sometimes it's exhausting to other people too. So it's something that I've like been trying to be more mindful of lately, that like you don't have to go through it alone, and there's other people who go through it too. But the other people who are struggling too don't need to hear about your struggle all the time, you know?
That's a really good point. A lot of people, like, I mean, we rely on other people, our friends and our family, to get through those bad days and those bad times. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize that you don't always have the permission, I guess, to kind of lay all that out there and on other people all the time. Which
one of my girlfriends actually like taught me this like new thing, and I always forget to do it, but she always asks me if I can handle her like emotional labor, I guess. Yeah. Like if she's going through something, when she calls me to talk about it, she'll go, "Do you have space for this right now?"
Yeah.
And I always appreciate that so much, because I've never asked anybody that, and I've never been asked that before.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I sometimes forget. But like one of my newer friends, like recently, I like was going through something, and she's like, "Do you want to talk about it?" And I was like, "Do you have space for this?" And she was like, "That's the nicest question anyone's ever asked me." And now we both, like, our friendship has like started on this premise where like we ask each other, and like it's really nice. And sometimes you have those friends that you just spill to, like, and if they don't want to reply to you, they won't. And like that one friend of mine, like he'll always tell me like, "This is a lot today. Like, chill out, girl." You know?
Yeah.
And like, but it's definitely like that's something that I now kind of try my best to remember to throw in. Is like, can you right now? Because if not, that's fine.
Yeah,
you know?
I love that idea. I know a lot of people, well, I've talked to some people about different kinds of friendships, and like certain people in their lives don't have the capacity to deal with those situations ever. And so you just have a different friendship or a different relationship with that person versus somebody that you can go to anytime or sometimes. Like, you are allowed to have different relationships with different people in regards to your mental health.
Definitely. And like you kind of learn that about people pretty quickly. Like you meet somebody new, and you can kind of tell by the way they react to things the first time if they're going to be somebody who wants to talk about stuff like that, you know? And sometimes they're not. And then you just kind of like avoid those. I had a really anxious day conversations with those people, and you just talk about other things, and that's fine. And then I feel like if you're somebody who's like pretty open and honest about mental health with those people who don't want to talk about it, those friendships kind of stay on a surface level, and those relationships often don't work because everybody has needs, right? And like I don't like need to date somebody who's anxious. I actually should probably not. But like somebody who can hear it and not help you necessarily, but just listen. Is like a super important thing in a friendship and a relationship, as long as you are willing to reciprocate that, you know?
Do you know what your triggers are for your anxiety?
Yeah, I not always, but I definitely like think that it comes from the things around me, especially with health stuff. Like, I had a friend a few months ago get an STI, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's going to happen to me." And I convinced myself to the ends of the earth, like Googled all of them. I was like, I need to be ready for how these work. So if this ever happens to me, that I know the signs, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like looking at all these things, like you can have this and this and this, and not, no, you do. And I was like, oh my God, I have to go to the doctor and like blah, blah. So like things like that. Or like I just found out recently that one of my friend's parents is not doing great and has COVID and like is not in good shape right now. And like that night I found myself like short of breath. And like if I got COVID today, and it's like it manifests itself, you know, and then you worry about that thing. But I think it's a lot of it is like environmental. Like if something bad happens to somebody, something bad is going to happen to me. I read on Instagram about a young person getting cancer. Yeah. I'm going to get cancer now too. And I'll think about that for months sometimes. Like it just depends on the way that it manifests itself. But I definitely think the triggers are in the people around me and what they're going through. And if something bad happens to somebody, I know something bad is probably going to happen to me too.
Wow. So what are the coping mechanisms that work for you to get through that?
I haven't necessarily found them yet. And like I talked to my therapist, and she, like I'll usually make an appointment, and she's given me some that I'm like trying to work on that I know would work if I was able to put them into play, but it's harder than it is like to do it than it is to just like say. But like some things that she says is like, just instead of when you're scared, like she used this example the other day where she was like, if you were getting on a roller coaster with no seatbelt on and someone was like, you're not allowed to be scared, you'd be like, but I have to be. And they'd be like, you're not allowed to be scared, so don't. And you'd be like sitting on this roller coaster, like scared you're going to fall off, but trying to act like you're not, which would make the situation even more stressful. Whereas if you feel yourself being scared, she kind of like tells me to separate my two parts, and she calls them like anxious Josie and then like guitar Josie. She's like, I bet you're not anxious when you're writing music, which is true. So she's like, what does guitar Josie say to anxious Josie? And I'm like, chill out. And she's like, well, why? Like, that's mean. Like, why don't you just be like, it's okay? Like, if your friend was freaking out about something, you wouldn't be like, shut up. You'd be like, are you good? You know? Yeah. And like, it basically just to feel the emotion, like instead of being like, I'm anxious right now and I shouldn't be, just, I feel very anxious right now. And then like letting it happen. Mm-hmm. And then instead of like suppressing it and just letting it sit in you. And then I think also something important though is that when you like feel something like happy, you don't just push that away either. You like feel it. Like you go like, I feel really happy right now. Mm-hmm. And like enjoy it, you know? There's that, like the feeling of it. And then she also like, when I've been going through my health anxiety recently, she was like, I want you to schedule 2 hours to panic about your health.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, no, that's so stupid. She was like, yeah. She's like, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. you can lose your mind over all the things you think you're dying from right now. Google all the symptoms, take all the pictures, do whatever you want, freak out for 2 hours. And I was like, but then I won't do it. And she was like, exactly. If you can just wait, like if you can get through the workday, if you can get through your morning routine, you can get through your workout, and you can just look forward to this 5 to 7 p.m. panic attack, like do that. And that way at least only 2 hours of your day are ruined, as opposed to little pieces of every second. And I was like, okay. And actually last week was way better with that thought in my head. I didn't do it, but like the thought of how ridiculous that was helped, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's like if you want to be really sad about this one thing, you can, but only between 6 and 8 p.m. tonight, you know? And then that's a good chunk of time, you know? But yeah, she's great. I really like her.
I like that idea. You're also very open about your weight loss journey. First off, I just want to say congratulations on making those changes for yourself.
Thank you.
How much weight have you lost?
Like 130 pounds-ish, I'd say.
That's amazing. So when you were younger, do you think that your weight played a role in your anxiety or vice versa?
Yes.
Yeah.
Only when people started to mention it. And a huge part of my anxiety that I haven't even said just because it's on my mind is how other people feel about me. Mm-hmm. I hate when people don't like me. It's funny because there's probably several people that I could list off right now that I just don't like for no reason. Like it's just they're not my person. I don't like them, and they haven't done anything to me. I wouldn't pick them. You know?
Yeah.
And like that's gonna happen in your life, and people are sometimes not gonna pick you. Whether it be somebody that you're dating, whether it be somebody who wants to be your friend, whether it be a teacher. Like I've had teachers just not like me, and I just can't stand it. Even though it happens to me all the time, where I'll meet somebody and be like, no, not you. And like it's just like I feel like I'm more sensitive to it because I feel like I got kind of pushed past and like overlooked because of my weight, because looks are just so important to people all the time, especially when we were growing up, like going to school in like the late 90s and stuff. Like people are ruthless, and they still are, and now there's like social media and stuff, but before it was all like playground, like just say it. And like anti-bullying wasn't a thing that people were looking at, and like it's just like I don't know, I think that it definitely has played a part in the sense that, like, I still always feel like I want to be careful with the way that I phrase this, because the whole, like, body positivity, I don't even want to call it a movement because it's just part of life now, and, like, being accepting of bodies of all sizes and shapes and all that has, like, really helped. But I still feel like I remember I was worried about being like the biggest person in the picture, the biggest person in the room, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in the moment when I was like in high school and all my girlfriends were like fit, tiny little girls and cheerleaders and like high metabolism, eat whatever you want, nothing happens, like, you know, and I was the complete opposite of that. I was just so much bigger than all of my friends, and I felt that way. And I still struggle with that. I still get scared when I go on dates that like guys are gonna see me and be like, you're fat, you know, and like see my pictures and be like, and then meet me in person and be like, no, that's not what you look like, you know. And like it's a weird thing that has definitely played into like I worry about people not liking me, and I worry about that being the reason why. And like I remember one of my friends, he was seeing this girl and he was like, I'm just not into it. And this was like recently as last summer, and I was like, why? She's so fit. And he was like, what? And I was like, she's so like she's really like thin and like slim and like fit. And he was like, okay. You think that's why I would be into someone? And I was like, I think it would be like a really important part of it. And he's like, no, she's boring. And I was like, oh, interesting. So then like every time something ends, or if a guy's not into me, or if like somebody's not interested in like having a conversation with me, I'm like, it's because you think I'm ugly. It's because you think I'm fat. And it's like, no, it's because you don't like my personality, which actually is an easier thing to handle than anything, because it was always just such like a big part of it. But yeah, ever since I was little, I was just always scared that somebody was going to yell out like, oh, you're fat, you know, like, and that's happened to me so many times, that I'm like, I'm still nervous about it. And like everything for me is based on looks, and like just not for me with other people, but for other people with me. Yeah. Like when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm looking at them being like, are you looking at me because you don't like the way that I look? When really they're probably just listening to what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah.
It's a big part of it. And like a big part of my anxiety is, like I said, worrying people don't like me. And that's always the reason why I think they don't. So like, yeah, I know it's weird. It's like it's weird to say out loud.
No, I'm actually the exact same way. So I was always a bigger kid. Yeah. And I got bullied a lot because of it. I was bigger than most of my friends. And I think the bullying contributed a lot to the environmental factors that kind of brought on my own mental health issues. But that's another story. But yeah, I was always a bigger kid. And every time that you meet somebody new, or like you're going on a first date or something, you're like, oh, what if they don't like what I look like? And now that I'm not as big as I was before, but I don't think I see myself the way that I am now. I think I still have part of that like fat kid in my head that thinks that everybody is looking at me and judging me based on my weight and not based on my personality or how I treat people or any of the other factors that play such a big role in friendships and relationships.
Totally.
Yeah, I totally get that.
It's it plays into it so much. And I think that it's like, I feel like and this is nothing against, like, I'm not like saying all men, but I'm just like, anybody who ever openly bullied me about my weight was a boy.
Oh, wow.
And it was never other girls. And I think that that's why I feel so comfortable and have such strong relationships with my girlfriends. And I like meet girls and I love them.
Yeah.
Because they've always been so much kinder to me, you know? Whereas with guys, I'm always so skeptical of everything that they say and do. Because I'm like, is everything that you need from me rooted only in how I look, you know? Yeah. And it's not like that. And people are so much better than that. And I feel like because of like being bigger and like being kind of like scrutinized for it, I like put these negative stigmas on people who don't even deserve it. Mm-hmm. Like I'll be like a guy will end it with me and I'll be like, it's because you don't like my body. And I'm like, no, it's because I'm annoying. Like I know, like it's not actually that, but like, you know, it's just like there's so many other things, or like it just didn't work. But in my head, I'm like, you're shallow.
Yeah, like you're an asshole for breaking up with me because you think I'm ugly. Like
you don't like the way my body looks. And he's like, no, you don't like the way you are. Like, you know, like it's just like, it definitely plays in for sure.
Yeah, your mind never goes to like, oh, our personalities just don't mesh.
No.
It's always something physical. Yeah.
Always physical, yeah.
Which I don't know how to kind of get over that or past that. But I mean, I think as we get older, it's becoming more apparent that personalities and
Definitely.
yeah, they're more important.
I think that's something that helps me sometimes. I find it hard, but like when something goes wrong, or like a relationship doesn't work, or whatever, and you kind of worry about it, you get down on yourself, and you're like, it must be me, it must be something that I did, it must be something whatever, and like you feel like I tried so hard, I did everything I could, and like it's my loss, you know, and I don't necessarily like the whole like it's his loss or it's your loss or like whatever, because it's nobody's loss if it wasn't meant to be. Like, just because you're awesome doesn't mean that it's his loss because it wasn't right, you know, and like vice versa. But I feel like just remembering that like the way that you get excited about people, they get excited about you. It's not just a one-way street. Yep. Like, you've been excited about somebody before. You like sit there and you like talk about your friends behind their backs in a nice way. Like, you tell a story about somebody that you love to somebody new, and other people do that about you. Like, other people go, I can't wait for you to meet my friend. Or, like, you should hear this really funny thing that Josie did the other day. And you're not even there to hear it. And I feel like it's just, like, the way that you've been excited about people and the way that you've talked people up behind their backs and the way that you have been like, this is the most amazing person ever. Or the way that you look at another girl and you're like, God damn. Like, go, girl. Yeah. Like, other people are doing that to you. You're not the only person who's exempt from that, you know? Wow, and it's so like, true. I know it's not good to, like, fuel your fire based on only what other people are saying, but like if you're somebody who's like had troubles always kind of like with your self-esteem and stuff, it's just like think of all the people that you love and how all the people that you're excited about, and all of those people feel that way about you too, and like that helps me feel like more positive and like gives me a little bit more self-esteem when I think of it like that.
Wow, I love that. I've never thought about it like that before, but that is so true.
It's hard to keep that front of mind, and I forget that very, very often.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's you're just as valuable as the next person, and you might be like on a few dates with a guy and looking at him being like, oh my God, like you hang the moon, man, like you're amazing. Like people look at you like that too, right? Yeah. Like they could very well be thinking the same thing, and like just placing all this value on another person and like acting like you have none is like going to be the death of you, you know?
Well, it's hard to keep that kind of at the front of your mind when if other people are talking about you, you don't hear it. So you kind of have to, I don't know, convince yourself that it's happening.
Well, it's in the same breath. I mean, people are probably talking shit about you too, right? Like the way that you talk shit about your friends, like they're talking shit about you sometimes when you're out there. That's and like what other people are saying about you beyond what you can hear is not really your business. Sure. But like it's unless they make it your business.
Yeah.
But it's a nice thought to know that like the love that you give is more often than not reciprocated.
Yeah.
Those friendships that you hold dear to you and those relationships that do work, as much as you look back on a relationship with a guy and be like, damn, I really love that guy. He sits there too and says the same thing. Like he thinks of all of those times that like you made him laugh and he goes, damn, I really loved that girl, you know? Just thinking of those moments is like, it's helpful to know like people place value in their thoughts about you. And again, it's so important to like not find happiness in what other people think. It's all about you, and like happiness comes from within, and you need to love yourself. It doesn't matter if anybody else loves you as long as you love yourself. Yeah. But it's a nice thought that helps me as somebody who has like a pretty low self-esteem.
I love it. Okay, as a radio personality, part of your job is to be kind of upbeat and on, like all the time. Is that hard for you to be kind of that version of yourself some days?
Yes, it is. But it's the job I picked, right?
Right, yeah.
And I remember, like, when I first started, my boss hit me up after one of my shows, and he was like, you had a bad day today? And I was like, you know, and he was like, because you sound sad.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, and he was like, I care about you, so I care. But someone who's listening doesn't care. They're not going to be like, oh, Josie sounds so bored and sad today. I hope she's okay. They're going to be like, I'm going to listen to this other radio station because maybe somebody there will bring me up and make me happy. And like at the same way that like some people's job is to like change your oil, and like you don't necessarily have to act passionate while you do that, but like I hope that you like kind of want to do it, you know, like, and that you know what you're doing, and that you are gonna like keep me safe in that, because that's your job is to change my car oil so it doesn't explode.
Yeah.
And like I picked a job that it's my job to be a distraction and to be a positive light and to be a just like the brighter side of things, you know, especially now.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's days where I literally want to be like, F COVID and F this, and I miss my mom and I miss my friends and I'm anxious and I'm tired and I can't stop crying, and like I was up all night last night because I couldn't sleep and like whatever, but that's not my job, you know. And like it's like hard sometimes, but it's just what it is, and it's good to be like transparent and like to be honest in things. And like some people aren't always happy, but I think for 4 hours a day, it's not too hard to be like, hey, here's the bright side of this, you know, because that's just what your job is. And I can come home and be like, everything's not like alone, but why are you going to make other people feel that way, you know?
Well, yeah, people tune into the radio to hear like, or to make their day happier, you know, like they're not tuning in to necessarily hear your problems or what's going on with your day, right? But do you have like a pre-show ritual or anything that you do to like get yourself pumped up?
I used to have a little bit more trouble with it than I do now. Now it's just kind of like second nature. Like I could be like literally crying between songs and sound like I'm not. And it's just kind of like something that you get good at. Like as any job, you get good at it. And I've kind of just become a natural at sounding excited all the time. Even if I'm not feeling that way. But no, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. When was my last like really shitty day? Maybe Monday. I like had just like a really anxious morning, and I was just like not feeling it. Did not want to get out of bed. Did not want to work out. And I was just like, I'm just gonna do the workout. I'm gonna drive to work. Get a Starbucks. Gonna listen to all the music that I want to listen to on my way in. And then you walk in, and I don't want to go into the studio with Tyler, Denny, and Fuzzy and be like, hey guys, I hope everyone's not happy right now because I'm not, you know? And it's just like, when I walk into work, I'm going to be in a good mood. And like, sometimes you can't get there. And there's some days where I just like won't go into the studio when anybody's in there still, because I just can't ramp it up for other people in person in that moment. But most of the time, the rule is, and they like use this analogy too, when I first started, they were like, just put all of your feelings that are negative, anything going on, you're going through a breakup, you missed your parents, you are sad about your friend, you are anxious, put it in a bag and just leave it outside the door. Close the door, and if you want to bring that bag with you when you leave, you can. Or you can just leave it at work too, outside in the hallway, and go home and be without it. But like in the studio, leave the bags outside. And that's just kind of the mindset, and I have always stuck to it, and it works tremendously. It also helps that the shifts are like kind of short. Like if they were 8 hours long, I don't know if I'd be able to handle it as well. But going in and being like 4 or 5 hours of like happiness is not the end of the world.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the same for you, but so at the beginning of the pandemic, I started vlogging or recording myself on my own Instagram stories on my personal account. And just saying like good morning and stuff like that, and people were messaging me like thank you for doing this, like I look forward to this, starting my day in this way or whatever. So then I continued doing it, and I find that when I do it in the morning, whether I'm feeling happy or not, just recording something that is a happy message for somebody else makes me puts me in a better mood right away, even if I don't necessarily feel that. So I don't know if you get that or the same way when you're on air, like being excited and happy about something. I don't know if that helps you at all. or if you feel the same way.
It definitely helps to kind of like be looking at the positive side of it. And like when you go on the air and it's like everything's closing again, instead of being like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Taking the angle of, at least we can still go to a patio, or this is the only time ever that we're ever going to be able to book a reservation at National on 8th on the rooftop without waiting in line. Like, just like little things that are like positive spins. Like, I don't just say them and then they leave. I'm like, oh, that's actually true. You know? And like, yeah, that sucks. But, like, just kind of talking to other people and being like, yeah, that sucks, but, is helpful to me too, because I'm not hearing myself. I mean, sometimes my opinions probably differ a little bit, like when everything locks down or like they close the bubbles up, or like, and I'm like sitting here living by myself and I'm like, what the hell? I don't listen to my freaking friends. Like, it's just like those moments or like whatever, but if you have to find the positive spin on it for other people who live alone, kind of like hit that demographic of people. In the positivity, you always kind of hold on to some of it. So it would be kind of impossible not to, you know? It's definitely, I agree with you, yeah. For sure helps.
Okay, I have 2 questions for you that I like to ask kind of all of my guests. So the first one is, what is your favorite thing to do for self-care?
I like to go for long drives. I love going for long drives. Like, and if I'm feeling stressed, like sometimes it'll be like 8 or 9 at night, and I'll just get in my car and I'll like literally get on Deerfoot and go all the way to Okotoks and then all the way to Airdrie and then come home. And I know that it's like it's an expensive regime. And I used to do it a lot, and now I do it less. And I find like how often I'm doing it is actually a pretty good teller of where I'm at mentally. If I go like a couple weeks without, I'm like, you're probably feeling good. Yeah. But that's one of my favorite things, is to just like get in the car and be like, just, you can spend money on gas. You have my permission. Let's listen to some good music and let's go for a drive. And that's like probably my main one. And my other one is probably working out. Like I love it. Yeah. And that's like my me thing. I hate doing it at home. Yeah. It's the worst. But going to the gym is definitely a practice of self-care for me. Like getting up in the morning, going and like doing the workouts and getting stronger and that kind of stuff. Like I find that it's like a lot of like, there's a thin line between that being abuse to yourself and it being helpful if you're doing it too much. And I definitely waver on the line sometimes. But yeah, I'd say long drives and working out probably.
Yeah, I definitely, working out is one of mine as well.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it is like the social aspect for me too. Yes, going to the gym and seeing my people and yeah.
It becomes like a little community. Like I used to go to F45 and before that Rumble, and those gyms are like community gyms. So you're paying quite a bit, but it's like you see the same people all the time. And Good Life never had that until time slots became a thing. Yeah. And then I found that I started to really enjoy it because I was going like for like a couple months when they reopened a little bit, or like a month and a half, whatever. Every day at 7:15 in the morning, you see the same people. And I was like, this feels like a little community, and you like start to like smile at each other and be like, oh, we're obviously on a similar schedule because we come here at this time every day. And like, it was nice to like have this like little silent alliance with all the people at Good Life at 7:15. And they were just like, hey, we're all here to work on ourselves. Have a good day, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree. Yeah. Okay. My last question for you. Is there a stigma or misconception surrounding mental health that bothers you the most, or that you hear most often but isn't true?
I would say just the idea of like, just chill out or just be positive. Words are nice, but nothing is more frustrating than hearing somebody tell you to calm down. Yeah. And I do it too. Like spitefully, like sometimes if somebody's freaking out like to a point where I'm like, this is ridiculous, I'll be like, calm the frick down. I have friends like that whose anxiety is like even worse than mine, and they'll be like, blah, 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 and I'm like, shut up and calm down. And I hate that I even do that because their anxiety is more like severe than mine in certain aspects. I'm thinking like, you need to chill, and it's not like that. And like I have friends who will like often be like, yo, chill, like just chill, and I'm like, I physically can't. Mm-hmm. And like it's sometimes the just calm down or the just try to find the positive side isn't possible. And I had a friend like that the other day just be like, just be more positive. And I was like, I can't. I'm sad right now. And I don't know why, but I can't come out of this. Mm-hmm. And like, been like this for a couple weeks. I feel like really negative, and I can't just change that.
Yeah.
And like, you can say, I'll work on it. But you can't just be like, stop feeling that way and be positive. And I hate that some people think that it's that simple, because it's like almost insulting. Because you're like, if you think if it was a matter of just calming down that I wouldn't have already, like, I'm exhausted. Like, I would love to calm down, but I don't know how.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that would definitely be what I think.
Yeah, I like that one. Okay, well, that is all the questions that I had for you. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't?
No, I think that this was a very enlightening conversation. You're very fun to talk to.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If people want to contact you or have more questions or want to reach out, can they do that? And how do they do that?
Definitely. You can find me. Facebook's not the best place. I kind of like lose track of notifications and invites on there just because it's kind of dying, I feel. But Instagram at Josie Balka is probably your best bet. It's JosieBalka, and if you just like send me a DM, I will always reply to it.
Perfect.
Unless it's really creepy, then I won't reply to it.
Okay, so don't be creepy, but we can message.
But I love my main form of communication is definitely through Instagram, and then also like I use TikTok a lot. Same thing, Josie Balka. Twitter is Josie Balka FM, but they're all pretty much the same idea. Okay,
awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you being so open and honest and vulnerable, and I think it was such a good conversation. So thank you.
This is great. Thank you for thinking of me and for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Feel free to reach out at any time. You can contact me on Instagram and Facebook at Stomp the Stigma YYC, and you can email me at stompthestigmayyc@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. And if you or someone you know would like to come on, I would love to have you. Share your story, speak your truth, and together we can stomp the stigma.